Hello and welcome to the second episode of Park Week, a series of reviews on this channel dedicated to every film in what is perhaps my favorite franchise of all time, Jurassic. That's it. We'll just call it Jurassic, as I said, folks. Not Jurassic Park, not Jurassic World, not Jurassic Universe, not Jurassic this or that or the other thing. Because at this stage, what even is it anymore? Today, being our episode, I will be speaking on the second film in this wonderful series, The Lost World, Jurassic Park, from 1997. It's honestly a bit strange for me to discuss it second because, in all candor, this was not the second Jurassic Park film that I've seen. It's actually, honestly, of the original trilogy, I believe it's the last one I saw originally as a child, because how I found out about this film is actually quite an interesting story, and I'll expound it here. So, obviously, as you know, I've seen the first film a number of times, and my review of it is sort of indicative of kind of my fatigue with certain elements of it, and of the film itself is just a product of its time and really just how it didn't necessarily hold up the best. And also, I had seen Jurassic Park 3 alongside it a number of times, and I will be talking about Jurassic Park 3 tomorrow. And I naturally assumed, I don't know why this was, that those were the only two films in existence, because I suppose, well, you know me and maths, I don't know how to do them. I didn't register that Jurassic Park 3 was 3, I just thought these were the first two, until I actually started consulting the behind the scenes material in Jurassic Park 3 and found that there were allusions made to a second picture that was in between 1 and 3, and how really a lot of that supplemental material seemed to be scored with music that was not from either the first or the third film. It sounded distinctly like John Williams, but it wasn't quite the first film. I was thinking, where did this music come from? And then I ended up finding out that indeed there was a second film called The Lost World Jurassic Park. And right away, at the age of either 8 or 9, I don't remember how old I was, I endeavored to secure a copy. It was actually quite difficult for me to track down, honestly. For some reason, I don't know why it was, back then, copies of this particular picture were scarce, apart from really just general box sets of all three of them compiled together. But I did eventually track it down, and I watched it. And I want you all right now to put yourself in the perspective of 8 or 9-year-old me. And imagine yourself there, watching this picture for the first time, having seen Jurassic Park 1 and 3 endless times before, and just viewing before you this new entry. Well, it's not new in that sense, but it's new to you, entry in this series, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, a girl gets swarmed by compies. Oh, these people are going after dinosaurs and jeeps and such, and actually rounding them up like in that John Wayne film Atari. Oh, a guy gets ripped in half by T-Rexes. Oh, someone gets stepped on by a T-Rex. Oh, goodness. The scene with the long grass and the raptors and everything else, and oh my word. It all ends in San Diego, which is approximately 1 hour from where I'm situated. This is the best film in the series. That's what I thought as an 8 or 9-year-old child. And does that opinion still hold to this day? Well, we'll get into that once we detail some of the things here. So, one thing that's interesting about this particular entry is that a lot of people, actually, before I really discuss how this film is perceived by most people, I encourage all of you to check out the videos of one Klayton Fioriti. I believe that's how he's pronounced, uh, on the subject of this film. Because really, if you spend maybe about an hour on his channel, you'll come to find out that really this film is very much of merit and is quite a lot more than most people think it is. Because most people, dare I say, attack this film wrongfully, primarily because it is not the same movie as the first. And they find some of the most inane things to criticize about it in the extreme. And let me tell you right now, Spielberg himself, in the making of this picture, even said it's not the same movie. So there goes your argument there. It's not the same movie. So get over it and just watch it for the movie that it is. And it's my estimation also that if people were to view this picture not as a direct sequel to Jurassic Park, which even though I'll get into why it is that it works as a sequel to Jurassic Park, if they viewed it instead as either an adaptation of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's The Lost World, with maybe some elements of King Kong mixed in there, no one would have anything bad to say about this picture. And I'm going to be frank with you. I have only one problem with this film. And it's not really even a problem. It's more of a nitpick, really. Considering what happens later on in the film, that girl at the beginning, who is incidentally played by Camilla Bell, who about 10 years later would go on to play Evelyn in 10,000 BC. As you know, that's kind of an underrated picture in my estimation, and I will talk about it here at length at some stage. But considering what happens later, that girl should not have survived. Maybe that's just my sort of warped viewpoint on things, but really, you could sort of argue that, Hammond was kind of covering up that she, quote, survived, unquote, whatever the case is. But anyhow, and also, just so you can kind of sort of have an open mind as to this picture, I also recommend you watching a review by, I believe his name is FilmSpeak, where he discusses how this film is essentially a perfect Jurassic Park sequel. I'll try and see if I can leave links in the description to these people, Klayton Fioriti and FilmSpeak, to where you could, with your viewing of this picture, perhaps consider them alongside their analyses and also mine. But unfortunately, it seems that I cannot fully endorse a lot of what they have to say because really they still have problems with this picture. And I am going to endeavor in this review to defend every single issue or perceived issue that people castigate in this film. But anyway, one of the things that people talk about is how Jeff Goldblum as Ian Malcolm is a completely different character here than how he was in Jurassic Park, where he was sort of a snarky, kind of a smart sort of fellow. and really kind of not necessarily befitting of anything other than a catalyst to certain things. Really just sort of a kind of proving that everything was wrong and such, and really more of a comedic relief in that sense. And they think, what happened here? Why is it that he's so serious in this picture? Why does it seem like that he has gone through a traumatic experience, considering how he was in the first film? Well, it's because he did go through a traumatic experience in the first film, and his portrayal in this picture is consistent with how he is in the second half of Jurassic Park, after he is flung by the T-Rex into the outhouse and is basically on morphine for the rest of the picture. He didn't lose any of that, essentially. He's sort of battle worn in a lot of instances. And he carries the film rather well. In fact, a lot of the lines in this particular picture, a lot of the best lines come from him in that sense. He says to Hammond this is incidentally the second and last time we do see Hammond in this series. He says to Hammond when they're actually setting out to head to this island, Isla Sorna, if you want to leave your name on something, fine, but stop putting it on other people's headstones. And there's even other lines in there that I can talk about. There's this line where he's speaking with Arliss Howard's character. He says, taking dinosaurs off this island is the worst idea in the long, sad history of bad ideas, and I'm going to be there when you learn that. People tend to think that he's not the same snarky person that he was. Those lines right there completely refute that argument. Yes, he's a bit more cynical on his outlook of things, and indeed, he does perform a different function in this picture, but that core quality of him has not been lost in any sense. And I think it's best reflected in this final line that I'll mention of his, where basically when the Buck Rex is loose from the boat and is basically causing a bunch of havoc in San Diego, or will be causing a bunch of havoc in San Diego, and Arliss Howard, Peter Ludlow, is essentially looking on in disbelief. Malcolm whispers to him, now you're John Hammond. And that, I tell you, if you cannot appreciate just what an ironic line that is, and just how fitting it is for someone like Ian Malcolm to be uttering within the circumstances, you have no right to criticize this film, at least in my estimation. Also, the lysine contingency, an element in the first film that is kind of glossed over and really just brought up as a means of kind of controlling the dinosaurs, is carried over into this film. The reason why the dinosaurs survive on the second island is because of it. Because they eat plants and such that are rich in lysine. And it makes sense. The explanation of Site B itself does make sense, because after all, you can't just really continue to breed all your dinosaurs on one island. Isla Nubla, as Hammond says, was really just a showroom, something for the tourists. Site B was the factory floor. It makes a lot more sense to have a separate area from the actual park where you can do your research and actually just really raise these animals. And I'm going to get so much hate for this, I know it, but objectively, it is a better looking film than the first. Personally, I prefer Janusz Kaminski's cinematography to Dean Cundy's, and it really is a sign of just how effective it is, the fact that he has continued to work with Spielberg consistently on every film after this to this day. Because if you consult behind the scenes material, they were trying really not necessarily to top the first film in a lot of just how, quote, great, unquote, that film was, but they were really trying to make sort of a more gritty and realistic sort of a story. And, dare I say, they've achieved it in a lot of ways. You really do feel as if you're on this island. Uh, in my estimation, I think Humboldt County, where they indeed filmed quite a lot of this up there in California, is more convincing than Kauai in terms of setting. I've really, to be honest with you, have never seen it anyplace else on film apart from maybe Walking with Dinosaurs. And I'm talking about the series here, not that execrable film that they did about 10 or 15 years ago. It works on a lot of levels. And as I said, a lot of shots in this picture are really beautiful. If you actually just take the time to notice these things, and if you've seen this film as many times as I have, and I've seen this film, as I've said, probably about as many times as the first, if not more, you'll just come to realize, really, this is a beautiful picture. In all candor, take any moment from it. I know there are quite a few in my mind that do stand out. I can't necessarily think of them, but believe you me, if you were to pause this picture at any stage, you will find that it's just immaculate the way it looks. And it's really more pleasing to the eye than the first, in my estimation. And that carries over into virtually all aspects of the film, as you'll come to find out. Another of the big things that people criticize and basically say that this is the worst thing that I've ever seen in the franchise, it is the low point of the franchise, it never really even should have been there, is the whole gymnastics thing with Kelly Malcolm sort of kicking the raptor out of the window, and just how stupid it supposedly seems. It just seems to be unintentionally theatrical and, just to be honest with you, out of place. A lot of these people think. Let me tell you, that is a better instance of foreshadowing than Lex's abilities of being a computer whiz in the first film, because it's brought up of her being a gymnast at 17 minutes and 38 seconds in, and paid off an hour and 36 minutes and 7 seconds. That requires the audience to remember that she's indeed capable of this. It gives her something to do. Unlike Tim, who's just cowering in the corner and not grabbing the bloody gun so he can shoot the raptor. And I tell you, she is the only person in at least this first trilogy who has successfully killed a dinosaur. And a lot of people really don't realize that, because they're just wrapped up in how stupid this moment is. Let me tell you, this moment is no different from when Alexis is sort of tricking the raptors in the kitchen with the whole force perspective thing and the mirrors and whatnot. And it's no different from when Grant kicks the raptor near the end of the film. It is perhaps maybe a bit more theatrical. It is a bit more elaborate. Perhaps maybe in some instances excessive. But it's no different. And once you realize that, you'll come to think, go Kelly. Really, go Kelly. Honestly. You want to know what else is a better instance of foreshadowing than Alexis's computer capabilities? The death of Dita Stark. And most of you probably don't even know who on earth that person is. It's essentially Peter Stormare's character in the picture. The mercenary who is sort of tasing these poor consignathus with this cattle prod, essentially. Because right from when he's introduced, what sort of person he is. You know, indeed, that he has no regard for these species at all. He does this basically all the time he's on screen, and his comeuppance is justified when it happens, in my estimation. Objectively, you cannot say that it is not better than the whole X thing. It's simply superior to it, honestly, in my estimation. And you get a cool death scene out of it, which incidentally was borrowed from the novel, except he took the place of Hammond, essentially. And more things on the characters. A lot of people, particularly who don't seem to view this as a valid entry in this series, and really just rant on it because, you know, it's not the first film. They really seem to attack Sarah Harding as sort of being an incompetent fool in the situation, especially considering her novel counterpart. Let me tell you, this film is a masterclass at plunking people in from the real world into an unfamiliar environment and letting them learn along the way to where, yes, they become competent. In fact, even her line that she speaks to everyone, "We're here to observe and document, not interact," is spoken after she learned not to interact with dinosaurs in the whole scene with the Stegosaurus and everything. And people also are wondering why it is that she tends to sort of forget a lot of things in the situation, whether it be, you know, the blood on the jacket from the infant tyrannosaur, or even, you know, just really being in the circumstances that she's in. Let me tell you, if you were in those same circumstances, you would yourself be tremendously exhausted, and really that kind of stuff wouldn't necessarily be at the top of your mind. You'll be sort of in survival mode at this stage, to where you'll forget a lot of the basic necessities of, you know, that sort of thing. Certain precedences are forgotten when it comes to survival. And really, Sarah's stupidity is really just chalked up to exhaustion. And I'm aware in the novel that she's basically sort of presented as sort of this, quote, strong female character. She really has to earn that position in this picture, to where when she is essentially with the raptors and kind of dislodging or disgorging or what have you, the tiles on the roof, to where one falls down and basically they're sort of attacking each other. That moment feels earned because she's changed so drastically throughout this picture. A lot of people don't realize that, honestly, and they're just thinking, "Oh my goodness, she's such an idiot." A lot of people really don't pay attention to most of the things in this film, much less this franchise. It just it astonishes me. Also, I really should mention that indeed without this film, you probably would not have Vince Vaughn as the major star he is today, even though he did do one film previous to this, but really this was sort of his breakout role. And while it doesn't seem like he does much in there, you really have to pay attention to just how integral he is in basically the chain of events that unfolds uh, throughout this picture. In fact, speaking on Vince Vaughn, when he's going through the operations building, trying to find the power source and whatnot, and evidently does stumble across at an hour and 29 minutes and 36 seconds a mural depicting uh, Jurassic Park as kind of a working theme park. I want that on my wall. That's what I thought for several years. I really want that on my wall. It looks so beautiful. And you'll begin to realize that yourself. It's just one of the aspects that makes this film really so underrated, in my estimation, really misunderstood, if I've not already made it clear so far by all of the points that I've been addressing. And of course, regarding characters, I would be remiss if I did not mention Roland Tembo, possibly Pete Postlethwaite's best screen role. I certainly know of no other, apart from maybe Jones and Benjamin in Animal Farm, that carries this much power and really is just this iconic. Is it a cliche? The Great White Hunter? Yes, but it's one that I never tire of. And he's essentially Roxton in this picture, with him going after the T-Rex, because honestly, who wouldn't want to go after a Tyrannosaurus Rex at this stage and justify his existence as the greatest hunter who's ever lived? Any scene with him, it is honestly worth your time. And most of his lines are quotable. I don't have really any of them down here, except for maybe his last line, which, again, I brought up in my review of the first film how there's some clever instances of wordplay in this franchise, you'll come to find. And this is another one, after he's sort of been disillusioned by the loss of everything on this expedition, particularly his hunting partner, RJ, that really, at the end of the day, when he did tranquilize this Rex, it was all for naught. And he says, "I believe I've spent enough time in the company of death." That line carries a double meaning, because yes, InGen itself is indeed a company of death, but as a hunter, having basically tracked and shot every animal there is possible to track, he's essentially had enough of this business itself. And really, it just took this experience to sort of shake him from this stubborn belief. And it's just brilliant, in my estimation. What else is there to say of this film? You've noticed I've talked mainly about, the characters and the look and everything else. A lot of the stuff that people really tend to sort of rag on for really no other reason than that it's essentially not the first film. Let's talk about the dinosaurs, because let me tell you, yes, while the CG effects in the first film do look good for their time, I did honestly have some issues with the animatronics, as you know. They look just a little bit stiff to me, particularly the T-Rex. Let me tell you, in this picture, the dinosaurs, be it CG or practical, have never looked better. They move tremendously smoothly. They actually, instead of using just like traditional puppetry or whatnot, they actually use hydraulics and such in the joints of these things, to where these animals look real in every shot that they're in. And the CG, this is a brilliant move on in a cinematography sense. the decision to have the T-Rexes essentially have all their scenes at night in almost total darkness. Well, not total darkness, but in enough darkness to where it sort of hides a lot of the limitations of the technology. It makes it just that more effective. And moving on to the T-Rex as well, another thing that I think this was only in really like a couple reviews, probably like the Nostalgia Critics review. And if you want my thoughts on the Nostalgia Critic, I used to love him as a child, really a teenager, but ever since I found out what happened with, I don't really want to get into it, but the whole controversy with the whole Channel Awesome thing, he's sort of fallen out of favor for me, and I really don't watch any of his stuff anymore. But he sort of complained about the T-Rex and how basically an hour and what is it, something minutes in, about 20 minutes in, how the Rex fails to catch up with a mob of people, uh, when really it could basically catch up to a Jeep in the first film. Let me tell you, that is a matter of circumstance, terrain, and really just self-preservation on the Rex's part. If you were indeed an apex predator who is however many tons and such, would you necessarily want to exert all your energy just to keep up with a group of people who are going slower than you? You don't necessarily need to expend that much energy. And it makes sense. So that's another point that people should stop complaining about. And yeah, these dinosaurs have never looked better. Spielberg himself said of the infant Tyrannosaur that to Stan Winston that you've built full-size dinosaurs, but that baby T-Rex is your little miracle. To my knowledge, there is nothing in the field of special effects that moves as convincingly as that little puppet right there, to where you think that yes, this is a real living creature, not like the the just stiff waterlogged model of the first film, which really I'm kind of glad that they only used it for that one sequence because oh my goodness, that thing was just so stiff. I just couldn't believe it. Really. And even in broad daylight, which a lot of these creatures, particularly the herbivores, are seen in, the CG, it looks really good. You're not going to convince me that these are not real, these animals. And really, it's used almost more sparingly than the first film, dare I say. And I think it works really well in that respect. And I did state my one problem at the beginning, and you're thinking, well, you said that there are some instances of editing in the first film that are just unforgivable, and how really they sort of are glaring instances of an otherwise immaculate product. Uh, Surely there are some instances here that really just blow the illusion. Let me tell you, the instances of editing in this picture. And I'm talking about where Burke, the sort of stand-in for Robert Backer, it's kind of funny how that works out. Just look up behind-the-scenes material for that kind of interesting bit of trivia, where he's running to the print in the earth, and basically it seems like that comes before his interaction with Dita Stark, when really it came after, or what have you. And also with the people sort of running towards this waterfall, and then a few shots later, they're actually near the waterfall, just entering into it. Those are really more interesting than infuriating. And you're thinking, oh, that's curious. What if they sort of extended this film a little bit. And I know for a fact that this film was much longer than it ended up being, and how uh, possibly there is a longer cut in existence. I would give anything to see that longer cut. I am of the rather, whether it's foolhardy or not is yet to be seen, but I am of the rather optimistic belief that a lot of that footage escaped the universal fire of 2008, and that someday we will be able to see all of these deleted scenes reinstated into the film. And how, really, if anything, the editing, a lot of the problems that people seem to point to can be attributed to the editing of the picture. And you just got to understand, uh, you know, that it is a hazard of editing. And once you come to understand really how the film was developed and really all that went into it, you come to realize that, you know, that's not infuriating, that's interesting. And you move on from it, as I well have. Other notable moments that I could possibly talk about: this picture, more than any of these pictures, does incorporate a scene of suspense without one dinosaur present. And I'm talking about the scene with Sarah on the glass in the trailer, which incidentally is actually Colin Trevorrow's favorite scene if you consult behind the scenes material. I tell you, you couldn't get me out of the chair through the whole of that scene with the glass breaking and what have you. I was like, oh my goodness me. Is she going to get out of this? Of course she does, but that scene is far more effective than the scene of the car coming down the tree in the first film, in my estimation. Because, yes, while they are similar in a lot of ways, you've seen one enough times and you've not seen one another, and you've come to realize that all that went into one makes it that much better than the other. You can probably figure out which scenes I'm talking about just by that. And the death of Eddie Carr in this picture is so noteworthy that people who are not even fans of this franchise, people who've not even seen the first film in 10 years or 50 years or however many years it was, and I'm talking about someone very specific. I'm not going to name this person because really I used to have respect for him. I no longer. That's just the way things are. People tend to think that this scene came out of the first film. It's that notable. And really, honestly, kind of the most shocking death in the series, honestly. A lot of the deaths in this film, yes, there was no blood, hardly any blood in the first picture. And I know Ahab, in his review of the first picture, said that, you know, if they did incorporate all of, or was it Guntik who said this? Whatever the case is, if they did incorporate all of the gratuitous violence that was present in the novel, in the first film, that it would be out of place. Let me tell you, the darker tone that this film assumes, which is in stark contrast to the kind of really just whimsical sort of Land Before Time-ish type of tone that the first film did, it's entirely fitting. This is indeed a grown-up picture in every sense of the word. It is a more mature picture than the first. You can tell that Spielberg really knows everything that he's doing when it comes to all aspects of this picture. I doubt every allegation of his not fancying this picture at all, and how he was really sort of disenchanted with the whole production towards the end, and really he wanted to finish this film to get on with Amistad, and how essentially really when he was filming certain bits, he felt at his lowest point. I doubt that with every ounce of energy because that's simply not what I see on the screen at all. In fact, if I were in a situation where I would meet Mr. Spielberg, and I doubt I will be in this position at all, I would say, you want to know what my favorite film is by you? It's The Lost World. It really is. And I haven't even seen all of his pictures, to be honest with you. I've seen his two Jurassics, and I've seen the Indiana Joneses, and I've seen a couple other ones. I can't really remember their names. I think Hook, but I didn't even realize that was by Spielberg until like the end of that picture. And a few others I can't remember. But really, for me, this is Spielberg, the apex of Spielberg. And maybe if you consider all these points, you might figure that out for yourself. Who knows? One more thing that I'll discuss that many people criticize. Why is it that these raptors cannot open doors when they fully demonstrated their cognizance and ability to do so in the first film? It's merely a case of there being not the raptors of the first film. And yes, they are on a different island. And let me tell you, they're wild raptors. They wouldn't know how to open doors. They had to learn how to do that from years of studying these people. And because if you actually watch the film, you'll know that a hurricane struck Isla Sorna and how they sort of had to fend for themselves in a lot of ways. So I don't want to hear it anymore. They're wild raptors. Case closed. And I didn't speak too much about the music of the first film by John Williams, mainly because, well, it's sort of solidified in the public conscience to where everyone says it's a great score and how really it's so well known and ubiquitous that it almost seems kind of annoying just how much you hear it these days and just how predominant it is. You don't even have to be watching the first film to hear it. It's just that ubiquitous, and I think even $10 Slimer, they mentioned that they grew tired of it. I got a cure for that. If you tire of listening to the score of the first film, listen to the score from this second film. It is by John Williams, and I'll tell you, it is way better than the score of the first film. A little anecdote that I do want to bring up. Evidently, I think he broke his back during the production of Jurassic Park, and so he couldn't necessarily conduct the music. He had to compose it, but didn't conduct it. This film, he is conducting this music. And my lord, if ever a sense of adventure and spectacle were felt in any of these films, it is here with this score. This score is the best score in the whole series. No argument there whatsoever. None at all. And incidentally, that is the music that plays underneath the behind-the-scenes material of Jurassic Park 3. And speaking on the score, there are a couple little instances that are nice homages to the original. I won't disclose very many of them, but I'll let you find that out for yourself. And you want to know, here is the right way to do an homage to the first picture. At around an hour and, well, let me look back at my notes here. This new system of mine requires that I have all my notes in front of me and really trying to refer to them all at once. It's sort of hectic. And I'll discuss that, as I said, in that longer video that I plan to make whenever that'll be. But about an hour and 20 minutes and 53 seconds, there's a very clever reprise of the ripples in the water from the first film. And yet again, at an hour and 49 minutes and 6 seconds, another clever reprise of the ripples in the water from the first film. They're not in the same places, I'll tell you what. They're not in a glass of water or anything like that. I'll let you figure out where they're at. And there's a couple other goodies in there throughout the picture that are in reference to the first film that I won't necessarily spoil here. But you'll watch that and you'll think, man, this film is great. Honestly, this is a worthy sequel to Jurassic Park. And what everyone's saying is wrong, and how really we ought to see this film as its own film, kind of loosely connected, not necessarily loosely connected, but sort of, we need to divorce it from the first film in a lot of ways. And I'll tell you right now, yes, it was always planned from the beginning that this would be a franchise. The first film made so much money that it was inevitable. And Spielberg himself was keen not necessarily to cash in on it, but to sort of explore all the possibilities that this engine could produce. And the original novel that Michael Crichton sort of really threw together in the extreme to sort of have be mined for material for this picture. I haven't read that original novel in at least 10 years. I've seen plenty of summaries and synopses of it to know that the novel itself it's not a perfect book, really. And one of the reasons why it's not perfect is because these two rival teams, and it's actually Lewis Dodson's team in the book. It's a completely different team in the film. It's actually InGen in the film. And you'll find that, yes, it is justified why it is that they're doing this. The film makes it very clear why it is that these people are after these dinosaurs. And you'll think, you know what, it does make sense. The two warring camps in the book hardly come into conflict with one another, if at all. And the villainous set don't bring a single firearm with them to the island. Not so in this picture. Because you know what? I tell you, these InGen mercenaries and hunters, they're armed to the teeth. They know that they're going into a dangerous environment. And even the Gatherer team, Eddie Carr has that Lindstrad air rifle, which comes to use later on, even though it seems like it doesn't. Again, many people don't pay attention to these things and just want to point to, oh, you know what? That really could have come into use later. Wait till the end of the film to see how it does. These people are more sensible in this picture than they were in the book. And overall, generally speaking, it is a better product than the book itself. You just have to read the book, or even hear a summary, or watch, as I said, Klayton Fioriti's videos to see that for yourself. And you'll come to realize just how effective it is in more ways than one. And of course, I've been meaning to talk about this through the whole of this rather disordered and meandering review, but the San Diego sequence, and how many people think that it's sort of a rushed transition from Isla Sorna to San Diego, and you're thinking, okay, that was abrupt. Can we have a few more minutes in between this? Let me tell you, if you've not seen King Kong, any version of King Kong, you will not get that transition at all. It will go completely over your head. And people are wondering why indeed did they go to San Diego at all. It was always the plan, really. Even though you hear all this stuff to where, they were going to do an ending on the island with pteranodons and such attacking helicopters, which eventually did get incorporated into Jurassic World, which we'll talk about when we get to it, and how really the ending was going to take place on the island. Let me tell you, an hour, 49 minutes, and 30 seconds, you will see Spielberg's first notion regarding a sequel to Jurassic Park. And if you watch some of Klayton's videos and you actually listen to a lot of the stuff that was going on in the development of this picture, you'll come to realize that A Dinosaur in the City, it was the original plan from the outset. And going back to King Kong, you want to know what boat the T-Rex is brought back on? The SS Venture. What more fitting vessel than that could you possibly get for this, venture? And another thing, and I keep going all over the place, I know, but, it's just that people really find the most inane things to criticize. Who killed the crew on this ship? Because it seems like all these people are dead and such. There's a hand hanging on the wheel or the helm or whatever it is, and how basically it seems like all of a sudden these people are dead. Why, the T-Rex, of course. I always thought that it was the T-Rex that killed these people, broke out and ate the crew, because if you actually look at how this thing is apprehended on the island, how it's in sort of a cage type of contraption, and you see on the deck of the ship that cage is sort of caved in to where's the T-Rex? What happened there? You can basically piece together yourself what exactly happened, and how there's even people say there really should be a broken window or a hole in the ship, as to sort of figure out, or really just to intimate that the Rex did really cause all this damage. There is a broken window. You have to really pay attention to see it, but it's one of the last things you'll see in this sequence. And the sequence itself, the whole San Diego sequence, I heard this from someone, and I forget who it is because I'm no longer attached to this fandom, that when the T-Rex actually breaks through customs and is seen roaring in front of the city, how it would have been a great place to end the film at a cliffhanger and sort of kind of make a more well-rounded trilogy, rather than, sort of the, quote, afterthought that Jurassic Park 3 was. I see where he's coming from, but at the same time, I love the San Diego sequence far too much to see that happen. I'm glad it happened, and I tell you, if you actually do look at the sequence, there's a lot of references to things in the sequence, just to like general like dinosaur and monster pictures. Again, Klayton's covered this. I don't mean to endorse Klayton all that much, but no one apart from myself has really done enough to really sort of defend this film for all that it's worth than he has. He's sort of, if you're going to do a video about the Lost World, Jurassic Park, you have to mention him. It's a requirement. And a lot of the things that I've mentioned that people do criticize. He does criticize himself, but hopefully, I doubt he'll see this. If you do consider these points, maybe even he will have a change of heart and think it's a perfect movie, because it is. And I must say, uh, if you don't like this movie at all, if you're still unconvinced as to really just the snubbed genius of it, and will just continue to be at the position that no other film exists other than the first, this movie has an answer for you in that the T-Rex in the San Diego sequence actually eats the writer, David Koepp. And I just recently learned that's how you pronounce it. Koepp, not Coep, because I'm accustomed to pronouncing words phonetically for some reason. But he eats David Koepp. So there you go. If you really don't like this picture, there you go. And when the film ends and you hear basically the ending speech with Hammond, basically saying that these creatures require our absence to survive, not our help and whatnot, and that you see the T-Rexes reunited together as a one big happy family. And you hear him sort of essentially putting Malcolm's words into his own mouth, that life will find a way. It plays as a very satisfying conclusion to the Jurassic franchise. You can argue that there didn't need to be any more films after this, and that really the two sort of work as a nice little duology. I know that's what my brother thinks. In fact, Jurassic Park and The Lost World are probably his two favorite Jurassic Park films. He told me that when I was going to do this series. And, well, yeah, I can see that. It is indeed a very satisfying conclusion that, if no others were made, I would be happy at the end of the day. So, what more can I say on this picture? In my estimation, it is a worthy sequel to the first that actually furthers the story. If you actually do bother to watch this film again, even if you haven't seen it since the 90s, perhaps maybe you should reconsider it. It's not the same movie. Go into it with that in mind. It is not the same movie as Jurassic Park. And it takes a rather structureless book and gives it a definitive structure. If everyone saw it as not a sequel to Jurassic Park, and I said this before, but as an adaptation of The Lost World by Conan Doyle, or even with bits of King Kong mixed in, everyone would like it. And I will mention this right here because I alluded to it throughout. A lot of the scenes in this film are basically pulled directly or interpreted somewhat from Conan Doyle's novel. The scene in the trailers is basically from chapter 11, For Once I Was the Hero, in which the Challenger party are confronted by the carnivorous dinosaurs outside of their little fort there. The camp scene is essentially a combination of It Was Dreadful in the Forest during Edward Malone's encounter with the Allosaur or whatever it was, and also the final confrontation with the carnivorous dinosaurs, the Stoa, in chapter 15, Our Eyes Have Seen Great Wonders. The whole thing with the raptors is basically the ape men in chapters 13, A Sight I Shall Never Forget, and 14. Those were the real conquests. And even the title of the film itself and just really sort of the basic conceit and plot of it, it's essentially The Lost World. And I never really made that distinction before, and now I have. So there you go. And in all honesty, maybe this is still a lingering whim of childhood. This film, more than any other in the franchise, for me, instills consistent thrills and wonder. And perhaps it may well do the same for you if you look at it for what it is. And as a result of that, in terms of rating, I'm going to give it a 9.5 out of 10. This is a perfect film, Jurassic Park film, anyhow. And there's nothing wrong with it in my eyes whatsoever. It's never boring. It's without a doubt a better made picture than the first. And when you get through with that first picture from 1993 and you ask yourself, what happened to some of these people after the events of this picture? I reckon that if you consult this and the film that'll come after this, really any of the films that'll come after this, you'll find a sufficient answer to that question. And it is my hope that even the defenders of this picture who do see some problems in it come to realize that really at the end of the day, it's a lack of foresight and really just a lack of attention that create these problems. And they should enjoy it for what it is and not denigrate it for what it isn't. This is my personal favorite of the series. And it is possibly the one I revisit the most out of any of them, purely because it was the last one I saw. And really, it's kind of the only one that really does inspire these feelings in me, at least after repeated viewings of the other ones. And because of that, it is, for me, the best Jurassic film. And with that, you're probably thinking, what is it really? Now that I've declared before you all what, in my eyes, is the best Jurassic film, what more do you have to hear from me? What more do I have to say on this franchise as a whole, given that my opinion is known as to which of these films is the best in the series? What more do you have to look forward to? Well, I'll let you find out with each subsequent entry. That's all I have to say, really. Tune in tomorrow to see my review on Jurassic Park 3, which arguably is even more misunderstood than The Lost World. And perhaps with these thoughts expressed and your interpretation of them, you may come to understand that really, at the end of the day, this movie, it's not the same movie in more ways than one. Thank you for watching, and cheers.